And our first panelist is Dr. Eliezer Papo, who is a senior lecturer at the Hebrew Literature Department at the Ben-Gurion University of the Negev, and he is also the chairman of the Moshe David Gaon Center for Ladino Culture at this university. His research centers on oral literature in general and Sephardic literatures, oral and written, rabbinic and secular in particular. In January 2014, his book titled "And Thou Shalt Jest with Your Son, Judeo-Spanish Parodies on the Passover Haggadah," received the prestigious Ben Tzvi Award. Dr. Papo is also a representative of the Israeli Academia in the Council of the National Authority for Ladino Culture, serving also as a member of its executive board. And I think this introduction was superfluous because we all know who Eliezer is. But anyway, it has to be done. So today, Eliezer will speak on the following topic: reading Zohar as Mussar literature, Hakam Ribi Avraham Finzi's Ladino translation of selected texts from the Zohar. So you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Okay, so Chacham Ribi Avraham Finzi's Ladino translation of selected texts from Zohar. I'm not going to enter into the question why in 17th century all of a sudden Hebrew became too complicated for Sephardic laymen. But what we do see is that from this century onwards, everything needs to be translated for common usage. So there are numerous translations of Torah and of Sidur and of selected prayers from Mahazorim, or Mahazorim in Sephardic pronunciation. Chapters of the Fathers also, because that is also a liturgical text as far as Sephardim are concerned. Later, in a span of over 166 years, no, basically over 150 years, to be more precise, 166 years, a tremendous collective work of summarizing of entire Judaism on one leg was done by 10 leading Sephardic scholars, and it is known by the name Me'am Lo'ez. Now, even though Me'am Lo'ez does quote Zohar occasionally, there were no known translations of bigger chunks of text, certainly no of the integral text of Zohar into Ladino. Actually, there is not one even today of the integral text, but there are Ladino translations which started lately. First of all, we have manuscripts of Idarot, Idara Rabbah, Idara Zuta, and this is because these texts were read on Meldados or on Yahrzeit, so consequently they became liturgical texts. And it was, as I said previously, ever since 17th century, it was well-established Sephardic tradition to translate liturgical texts. So once two bigger chunks of Zohar became liturgical texts, part of Sephardic Meldado / Yahrzeit, they were translated to Ladino, as we can see here, and also they were printed in Hebrew, for example, also in Belgrade, 1872. Now, it was only in 1858/9 that Chacham Ribi Avraham, son of Moshe Finzi, a scion of a Bosnian rabbinic dynasty of Finzis, translated a huge selection of the first two books of Zohar, in other words, Zohar on Bereshit and Zohar on Shemot. Here you can see the list of the people who prepaid the Bereshit Shemot edition of Belgrade, and here's the first page of the Zohar itself, and here you can see the second volume, which is actually, it's not actually the second volume, the second part, which makes part of the same volume, even though later it was published separately again in Belgrade. Then there were two additional re-editions in Thessalonica and in Smyrna/Izmir, and that proves that the text was well accepted in Sephardic reading community. So here are the pictures from those subsequent editions. And now I want to say a few words about the Chacham himself. He was the grandson of the famous Chacham Rabbi Yosef Finzi, as we can see here on the page 148, where he says, en el año, you can see it here, right? El año de 573, se fue mi señor Papo, Chacham Yosef Finzi, alava shalom, le'ir HaKodesh Yerushalayim Toveva. So he is talking about his grandfather, Rabbi Yosef Finzi, who made Hajj to Jerusalem. He was also a younger brother of Chacham Yosef Finzi. Now, this is very complicated with Sephardim. His grandfather was Yosef. Obviously, that means that his firstborn brother will be Yosef after his grandfather. This, let's call him Yosef II Finzi, was author of the famous book Velaket Yosef, printed in Ladino, and this is some kind of encyclopedia of rabbinical knowledge, in alphabetical order. Yeah, this is the book. And here you can see that this Rabbi Yosef Finzi had a son, Yehuda Leon Finzi. So our author, Abraham ben Moshe Finzi, is uncle of this guy. Now, why I'm bringing this guy, if it's already passing our rabbi? Because I only wanted you to see that if the nephew was alla turca, then probably his uncle was also alla turca rabbi. After that, we will have the first alla franca rabbis in Sarajevo. So this rabbi was also author of a famous liturgical, Kabbalistical liturgical work, Tikkun Chatzot. And now I want you to see something interesting, which is this. And why is that? That's the first text I've picked from the Zohar. You can see this is selection, right? Selection of the text from Zohar. So obviously it says Ma'amar 243, right? And this brings the text from Zohar. Rabbi Shimon Seiva para Tevaria. Rabbi Shimon went to Tveria. But then, what is interesting with this Sephardic Chacham is the conclusion. And basically, I will not deal, throughout the entire lecture, I will not deal with the Zohar itself. I will deal with his Divrei Mussar, the words of ethics which come after reading from Zohar. So, from this we can see that a person should never bother people who host him. So if they don't have a fork, he should never ask for a fork. That means there were already a small remark, a small footnote. There is no Ladino word, there is no Spanish word for fork in Ladino, because when they left Spain, there were no forks in usage still. So they met the fork in the Balkans, and they used Greek word for it, piron. Most of the people in the Ottoman Empire, however, though, didn't use it. So our rabbi is saying, if you come to a family which doesn't use a fork, don't be a snob. Don't ask a fork. Don't ask for a fork. Okay. Now, this is one of the most beautiful texts here. It says like this. Aqueos que usan a ir a la cabané, those that have usage of going to a coffee bar, right? A beber café, o sea dos, y le da el café. And now he explains. A person goes to a coffee bar to drink one coffee, maybe two, and still he imposes so many demands on the café, right? He asks for fresh water, and then he asks for nargile, and then he asks for the braise to lit on the nargile. And all of this is done only because he's paying for one single coffee. Now, look at this. Y todo es porque fue en su cabané. All of this because he went to his coffee bar. Que podía ir a otra cabané, because he could also go to another coffee bar. Ansi el Shem Yitbarach Cale que nos bendiga y nos dé bueno, porque vamos a su cabané. La cabané de vidas, la cabané de vidas y verdadera. The same way, the Holy One, blessed be He, needs to repay us many goods because we are going to His coffee bar and not to other coffee bars. He podía ser que se levantara el hombre y que se fuera a otra cabané, because a person could get up in the morning and go to another coffee bar por beber café, to drink his coffee. Ma siendo deja la cabané y se asentó a beber café de la ley, but being the fact that he gave up on that coffee and he went to drink the Torah coffee in the Bet Midrash, certainly the Holy One, blessed be He, will pay him many goods. Consequently, not only God is businessman who is running a business and who is treating us as his mushtaris. He specifically used the word mushtari. How would you translate mushtari? His clients, mushtaria. The Satan also is running his business. What's the business of Satan in the world? Oh, sorry, this is not the real text. Just a moment. Oh, I'm going back. Yeah, here we are. Okay. It is true that we all would like to give.
Wait, our time is. Just a minute.
Oh, okay, it's back. It is true that we all would like to give as much tzedakah as possible, right? But the thing is, ma el Satan es que no nos deja, but it's Satan who doesn't let us. Con su intento, porque todo lo que lastra el Satan es por hinchir aquel mal horno tan grande. Because entire his endeavor is to fill that huge fireplace that he has. And being the fact that the thing that best removes you from the fireplace is tzedakah. When you give tzedakah, you are keeping yourself away from hell. So the Satan is basically doing anything possible to prevent you from giving tzedakah. So Satan is also running his business, and we are basically clients of both of them, and we should rather be clients of God. That's the conclusion. So you can see also that this is beautiful. He's basically, from here we can learn basically who is his public. Most of the Jews in Sarajevo are either merchants or craftsmen. This is their logic, this is their mentality, this is their ethos, this is their ethics, and this is their understanding of world. They understand world as businessmen or craftsmen. And he explains them everything as to businessmen or craftsmen. So between other things, he tells them that if you are hospitable and you are showing hospitality, then actually, and you can see the Turkish word musafir used all over in the text, recibir musafir, algun musafir, un musafir, and so on. So if you treat the musafirs well, then it is amanet del Shemit Barach. You can see the combination of Turkish, Spanish, and Hebrew. Amanet del Shemit Barach, que trae carta de recomendación del Shemit Barach. The poor person who visits your home, he actually came with a letter of recommendation from the Holy One, blessed be He. And you should know that there is no person in the world which stands better after his recommendation than the Holy One, blessed be He, and he recommended the poor people in all kinds of verses in Torah. Okay, now Padres and Hijos, this is also one of the major subjects. So he's reading Zohar, but he is converting it into something doable, something practical, something relevant. So the relevant things is, and from him we can learn exactly, because he's speaking on the eye level with his clients, let's call it them clients. So we can see that he is trying to prevent things which they do, and he is fighting certain common approaches or common attitudes which are not to his a su gusto, okay, to his will. So he says, de aquí que preve el hombre como es hayab de empezar a su hijo el birkat hamazon y todo modo de cosa de mitzvah. From here we can learn how a person needs to teach his son birkat hamazon and all other things which are related to mitzvah. Y no agidiar al hijo, y not to have mercy on his son, because when you are not teaching him, it's having mercy on him, because kids hate learning. Como hay gente que dicen el jajam, ¿para qué está? What do we have rabbis for? And then he says that it is non sabe que pan de casa harta y pan de calle es fruta. He should know, and then he brings a popular proverb. It is the bread from house that makes you satisfied, and the bread that you find on street, it's just like a fruit. Okay. So then he says that, between other things, he says that if a person, obviously, person should give kavod to his parents, not only while they are alive, but also when they die. And it's not only during the first year, but that's for life. And some people don't give them kavod in this world, other people don't give them in another world, and some people don't give them in any world. And then he also brings the example, and this is very interesting and very important. The Gentiles are serving as competition. So he says, look at the Gentiles. La natura lo da. It's very natural to treat your parents with respect. Porque afilu la sumot dan kavod a los padres. Even the Gentiles give honor to their parents, even though it's not one of the mitzvot of the Gentiles. How much more so the Jews should, if they are specifically commanded to. And then this is again a typical Sephardic Chacham mathematics. There is one of the 10 commandments says you should respect your father and mother so that your life should be prolonged. So he says, okay, consequently, if you don't respect your parents, you are basically shortening your own life, and in order to do that kind of business, you really need to be stupid. Okay? So, okay. Now, some bad customs of the Sarajevo Jews. We can also learn that Jews were not different than other people of Sarajevo, and they were not different at the end of 19th century or at the beginning of 21st. He says, solamente hablar, y reír, y hacer burla. The only thing that they all do is talking, laughing, and making fun of everybody. And then he brings that even Moses, the sin of Moses, which is not explicitly mentioned in Torah, was related to this. And if Moses felt in this, how much more so we should be careful about that, and so on. So, okay, here is something that we can call microphonomania. He speaks about people who come on high holidays to the synagogue, and then they take over they don't take over the microphone, but they take over the teva, and they sing, and they think that they have beautiful voices, and they leave the chazan there to be like a groom waiting for the. You always know how the brides let the grooms wait, right? So he is there like a groom waiting, but what's really bad, according to this Chacham, is the fact that these same people don't speak with many other people in the community. So how it occurs to them that they can represent the people of Israel in front of God if they are quarreled with half of the community. So if you are quarreled with half of the community, you can't pray for them. Okay? Okay. Here is a beautiful play of words. He says, ya hay días que tenemos la hora. There are days when we have enough time. Like you are in Krakow, it's raining, She doesn't have anything else to do. Mamás queremos ir a la cabaret y jugar una dama, but we prefer to go to coffee bar and to play dama instead of learning Torah. Right? And then he says, esto es lo que dijo David Hamelech alav shalom, Adam lahevel dama. Okay? Man is similar to, how do you call it? Dach. To bread. Yeah, he's passing. But dama in Hebrew means similar, but he's playing with dama, which is a game that was played all over the Balkans. Okay? And then here it says that if you don't wash your hands, you will become poor. Now, this is a typical rabbinical technique when they take the thing that people are afraid most of, and then they take something that people couldn't care less about, and they connect the two. So, it seems that many people in Sarajevo didn't wash their hands before every meal that includes bread, and before every tefillah, and before this and before that. So the rabbi tells them, al netilat yadayim, al ayin, netilat nun, yadayim yod, ani. That means poor. So if you don't wash your hands, you will become poor. Now, nobody wants to become poor, so they should all start washing their hands. Jews and Gentiles, this is also very interesting. It says like this. Tomamos la prueba de abonoteno arabim, cuantos togarim hay que tienen sus udas abiertas que reciben musafires. Let's and we have a proof from the Turks. Basically, he's speaking of local Bosnian Muslims, today called Bosniaks. So, how many of the Bosniaks have opened houses for guests and we don't? So, interestingly enough, again, when speaking about ethics, he takes local Gentile population as competition, and he says, look at them, they are respecting their parents, should we also? Look at them, they are accepting musafirs, they are accepting guests, how much more we should do so. Right? And then he says, okay. Here we can see that Sarajevo Jews basically did not have autistic approach to Gentile surrounding. So they cared a lot how they are seen by the Gentiles. Consequently, many of them, when traveling together with Muslim and Serb merchants, many of them would not put on talit and tefillin, not to be laughed. So he says, and look at the Muslims, how they couldn't care less if you're going to laugh about them or not, but they bow down and they wash different parts of their body, and they couldn't care less. So the Jews also shouldn't care less. They should be proud and proudly display their tefillin and their talit. Okay. Actually, I will switch this one. Here is another example of Sephardic Mussar, really typical example of Sephardic Mussar. He says how Harav Hamufhak ונוגה לו ברק, החכם השלם כבוד מורנו ורבנו הרב רבי שמעון בן חסון נוחתו עדן, מאיר סלוניקי ישמור עליה האלוהים. All of this is only the title of the rabbi, right? So the Rabbi Shimon ben Hasson was traveling with Rabbi Finzi in Bosnia. And he asked him how much time there is from Han to that marketplace. So the guy told him, I don't know. So he turned to the Hanji, to the person that runs the inn, and the Hanji told him so and so. And the rabbi told him, oh, no, it needs to be 4 hours. So later they went to another place, and the rabbi again asked him how much is from here to there, and he again said this much, and he told him, no, it's a bit less. So finally he asked him, how do you know? And he said, well, I'm reading Tehillim all the time, and it takes me 2 hours. So once we went from the Han to Charsheh, I read it 2 times, so it must have been 4 hours. And the other time, I read only half a book, which means it could have been only 1 hour, no more than that. So, and from there he teaches that he recognized how small he is in front of that rabbi, and from that time on, he started using the time he spends on applause to repeat Tehillim. All these are typical subjects of Sephardic Mussar, and again we have the tzitzit tefillin. The tzitzit and tefillin thing was a major problem. You can see again, y no como algunos que viene a fuerte a decir afilu tefilá por causa que se avergüenzan de vestir tzitzit y meter tefilim delante los goyim. And not like some of us who skip their prayers because they are ashamed of putting tefillin and talit in front of the Gentiles. So we see that this is a subject that jumps here and there. I'll skip this one. Then there is eruv. I don't know how familiar you are with Jewish law, but Jewish law basically says that you need to have walls, or at least something similar to walls around the city in order to carry on Shabbat. And then he says, and again, we see the typical merchant mentality of Sephardic Chacham. Because he says, you are losing your capital in the heaven. Even Satan knows that he should not push you to kill. Nobody kills. Even Satan knows that he shouldn't push you to steal openly. That's not what Jews do. So what Satan does, in your case, is to push you to carry on things when there is no eruv, right? And then, especially, what he likes is to push you to do things which look to you like mitzvah, which is carrying talit to the synagogue on Shabbat. So you say, this is mitzvah, right? I need to pray, I need talit in order to pray, so I'm carrying it. No, you can't. And then he explains how first you need to put talit over, then you need to put your jubeh over the talit, and that only then you can go. And this is exactly what Satan wants you. He doesn't even imagine that he will ever be capable of convincing you to kill anybody. But he knows that he can convince you not, and then you are just losing your points in heaven. Okay, here you can see to what extent, and this is really something very interesting. You can see to what extent a Sephardic rabbi from Bosnia was versed in the laws of Islam. He's describing a scene that happened, but he knows exactly what happens, and he knows all the technical terms, right? So he says, Dicho el Señor viva. Somebody told her Bashum Sagosum, and she responds, Dostum Sagosum. May you live also, right? So he translates it to Spanish, but he knows exactly what they do. And then he says, Presto se levantó el Dayan. Immediately the Qadi stood up. Y tomó abdes. So he made ablution before the prayer. Y le caldeó el namaz. Right? You see the Persian word, namaz. Como sus usanzas. Right? And then they made some halva. Por alma de la nivgeret, Jan ichi, in front of her soul. Again in Turkish. So you can basically see that he's familiar with Muslim customs. He knows all the technical terms. Sometimes he brings them bilingually. Sometimes he brings them only in Turkish. Sometimes he brings them only in Spanish translation. But he's totally at home with Islamic customs. Okay. So, what do we have here? See. He says many of our people, again, what Satan is trying to push people to transgress small things. So he knows, the Satan knows that most of the Jews of Sarajevo eat kasher, right? So he wants them at least to eat from non-kasher utensils. And people say, oh, who cares? And how, if you are a Jew from Sarajevo, how do you say, who cares? Chini es Ermini. Which means a plate is Armenian. In other words, who cares who cares of what plate you are eating from? And then he explains that you have to take care. Okay, now, here, well, basically I will stop here because it's time, I suppose. Yes. Because I want to say one conclusion. So we can see that we can see the Sephardic Chachamim being the fact that they themselves were merchants, and not only their rebaño, their people were merchants, they developed a very special logic, and they applied it to their theology. So, for example, and you cannot find this among Ashkenazim, and you cannot find this among other Jews, the Sephardic Chachamim invented corporation of mitzvot. What's corporation of mitzvot? Let's say that 10 Chachamim say, from now on, I don't have my own individual sins, and I don't have my own individual mitzvot. We all make them corporation. We make corporation. There are 10 members of the corporation. Each of them has 10 percentages of general sins and general. Now, this teaches us few very interesting things. First of all, they apply the logic of capitalism to metaphysics. As far as they are concerned, mitzvot that you have in the world to come, as well as sins that you have in the world to come, are your private capital. You can do with it whatever you want. You can also make it part of a corporation, because it's your personal thing. Now, this is one thing that we learn. Second thing that we learn is that they believed that their friends are better than them. Because if you believe that you should put all your sins, and you sincerely believe that there is such a thing as world to come, and hell and heaven and whatever, and you are still ready to put all your sins and all your mitzvot together with other people, that means that you are sure that they are better than you, and this business is good for you.
It's good investment.
It's good investment. It's good investment. Now, the third thing I want us to learn from this is, many people imagine that when you say, learning Zohar or teaching Zohar, right? Many people imagine Madonna or Rabbi Berg or any kind of New Age thing where people visapana, whatever, meditate. There are private classes and there are public classes. Public class of Zohar, just like, and this is basically, I believe, the peak of my lecture this morning, the same way they teach in Sarajevo from the beginning of the city, since Isa Beg established the teke of Mevlani dervishes, until this very day, they never stopped saying ders in Mesnevi. Mesnevi is something like Islamic Zohar, as far as its influences are concerned. It's a work of Master Jalaluddin Rumi, right? And these are, it's in Persian, and these are verses, and I used to go, and later when I started, when I was a kid, I used to go to hear Sheikh Faizi Baba, when he was explaining the Metnevi. And then today, when you see on the internet how all these things are interpreted, and when you compare it with the public class amongst the Bosniaks of Sarajevo, this is the same thing. They extract from this individual mystical poetry, they extract something practical for their daily life. So we can see that the way the Sephardic rabbis taught Zohar in Sarajevo is the same way that Muslim scholars taught Metnevi or Mesnevi by Jalaluddin Rumi in Sarajevo. Individually, you can write poetry. Individually, you can have mystical experience. Individually, you can reach some metaphysical, theosophical conclusions. But public class in Zohar, just like public class in Metnevi, means extracting from it practical message for your life. How to make your capital in the heaven bigger, how to cheat out Satan, how to appease God, how to become richer, how not to become poor. All these are obsessions of his public, okay? And you have Gentiles mostly brought, which is very interesting, mostly brought as good competition to Jews. In other words, instead of saying about them how they hate Israel and whatever. He says, look at them, how good people they are, and they even don't have that mitzvah. How much more we should? Or, look at them, they are not ashamed of prostrating themselves in front of you, even though you might laugh. So why are you afraid of putting talit and tefillin and so on? So basically, we can see, from his derashot, we can see high level of integration of Sephardic Jews in Bosnian society in 19th century, to the extent that people really care what Muslims and Serbs think of them, to the level that person who otherwise is praying wouldn't be praying in front of Gentiles, because that's a question of personal honor. He doesn't like the idea of being pointed. It's perfect Sarajevian until this very day. People don't want to be laughed at, people don't want to be different, people don't want to be... So he's praying on a daily basis, but now he's troubling, he doesn't like the Gentiles to laugh at him. And we also see that the Chachamim themselves are integrated into culture. They are versed totally into technical, liturgical Islamic terms, and they are using them just as description of situation, right? He's not trying to amaze anybody. He's describing the situation. So we can see that not all Judaisms are alike, and there is a need to understand Sephardic Judaism within its specific, very special Balkan context. Otherwise, we will just imagine that Ladino is Sephardic Yiddish and that Sephardim are Balkan Ashkenazim. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very interesting talk. The floor is open. If you have questions or comments, please feel free. Yes, Miriam?
Thank you for this wonderful talk, as always. I would like to challenge you with one analysis that you did about the capitalist operation. Why you don't see this as the roots of socialism and communism?
You know what? Even better. No.
Everyone according to his ability. Each one gets according to his needs.
I'll tell you why.
You cannot invest too much because you don't have, but you get back whatever you need to get the place in heaven and also mitzvah in the earth.
I love your challenge. I love your challenge totally, and I would opt for it immediately, being the fact that we went to the same schools and have same kind of belt and towel. But unfortunately, from the very fact that they do it only amongst the Chachamim, this doesn't include everybody in the community. So it's not a kibbutz.
Okay.
So you take 10 Chachamim.
Among them, they try to create a
Oh,
society
so
of people.
elitist, yeah. All the way you belong to rabbinic elite, you are equal.
It's not like Idra?
It's not like Idra. No.
What's the difference between...
Idra is something that you read on when somebody dies. And in Sephardic...
No.
The Idra is
Idra is a group of people together to study.
That's what Idra is in Zohar.
Yes.
Okay. Now we move a few hundred years to Ottoman Empire. For them, Idra is the text which reads the meeting of the group when Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai died.
Okay.
That's what Idra is for them. It's not a group of people. No, it's a text that you read when somebody dies. And if you dare, I still had a privilege of seeing some of the elders doing it. And if you ask them to explain you
In
something,
my family we do it.
yeah, if you ask them to explain you something, you get slapped on your back because it's not learning. It's totally magical. They are opening the door to next level, just like in the games, right? They are opening the door to next level to the person who died by reading this mystical text. And then, if you say, what does this mean? You are destroying the endeavor to push him to next level. So that's what Idara means in Sephardic context. The text, which is read, and usually it's read in Aramaic, and nobody understands a word.
That's true. Yes?
First of all, thank you very much. I very much enjoyed the talk. I have a comment and one question. So regarding the comment, what you ended with, the question of how the Ashkenazi and the Sephardi Mussar literature should be read very differently. One example that refers to what you brought up, how Sephardim in the Balkans were concerned with the perception of the outside world. In the Mussar movement, in the Ashkenazi context, to ridicule oneself in public is a Mussar technique, which would show how much you are detached from your ego. So there it's almost the other way around.
Exactly.
Which very nicely shows that your point is a very important one, I think. So my question would be, you talked about the Divrei Mussar, but what is the connection between these, let's say, the outcome and the actual passage taken from the Zohar? Is it, if you read it, is it something that you would consider artificial, that they try to merge the text and then they have a Divrei Mussar which is not really connected, or is there, do they choose wisely and there is a strong connection between the...
It's not artificial at all. Okay. It's basically, to my mind, obviously, it's a flow of thought. In other words, this is what he reads, and this is his association. And whoever was present in that kind of classes, he knows exactly how it works. Here's the text, and then you make it in order for people to come to you and not to read the text on their own. Why people are running to certain rabbis? Because they make it interesting. How they make it interesting? By all kind of stories and associations, but also because of the chain of tradition. Because there were very few occasions of self-styled or self-learned rabbi. Most of the Bosnian rabbis were sons of the rabbis, grandsons of the rabbis, great-grandsons of the rabbis, great-great-great-grandsons of the rabbis. So basically, people go to somebody who is trained, and this person is really following his associations. What can we learn from this text? And sometimes, for a modern reader, you look and you say, what's the connection? And sometimes it's obvious, like in this text with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai going to Tveria, right? So the text itself deals with how you should treat with respect the person who invited you, and then he makes a very Bosnian, Balkanian conclusion that you should never ask for a fork if they don't have a fork. But this is only an example of what text is basically saying. But on other occasions, I really was like, what he's talking about? What's the connection? Because he brings something from Zohar, and then he speaks about his grandfather, which went to Hajj. And why is he bringing entire this story? This is beautiful, and this is so Bosnian. And there are hundreds of examples of this in Islamic literature. By now, I have found only one single example from Jewish literature. The Hajis are leaving at the beginning of Elul. They are the future Hajis. They are leaving for Hajj. Then his grandfather is writing in Kislev from Jerusalem how this poor Jew, which was still seen in Travnik in the beginning of Elul, by the end of Elul, in the middle of Elul, by the end of Elul, he joined them in the Holy Land. And why is that so? Because, and this is a mystical journey, and this is so typical of Islamic literature, Laylatul Miraj and so on, and all of a sudden, you have a Sephardic rabbi, which is teaching esoteric texts the same way the Sufi sheikhs are teaching esoteric texts, and he's bringing the same kind of story. A poor Jew is given the privilege, being the fact that he was very careful in observing the divine commandments, he was seen by the Hajis in Jerusalem. The same way the Islamic poor men from Sarajevo are seen at Hajj by other influential and rich people who could pay for it. So it's, and I didn't see any connection between his story and Zohar, but this is his flow of thought. It's not didactic. It's not like mistreating them as idiots, or sometimes we do see rabbis treating people as, treating common masses as, but no, here is really flow of thought. That's my impression.
Ivana?
I'm curious to know, does Pinky mention the languages in which he speaks to the Gentiles? Or some other people?
No names of languages. He doesn't say Serbesco or Turkesco, or unlike the Mesech Eliezer, he doesn't use the names of languages.
Thank you for the presentation. I would like to ask you if they publish similar books afterwards. for instance, at the beginning of the 20th century or after that? Because it would be interesting to see the customs and what were their main concerns and must be.
Beginning of 20th century, no. There is a total rupture. We have last rabbis alla turca and first rabbis alla franca. The last rabbis alla turca were dressed as we saw Chacham Yehuda Leon Finzi. The first rabbis alla franca, like Rabbi Abraham Aaron Capon, he didn't even have kippah. What does that mean? He didn't even have kippah. Nobody had kippah. He didn't even have a fez. Alla turca rabbis wore fez. Nobody wore kippah. The alla turca rabbis wore fez, and he used to wear a hat on the street. But at home, or sitting, or whatever, whenever he's not praying, he used European hat. So he was the first alla franca rabbi. And from that time on, we see rabbis writing modern poetry. We see rabbis writing, for example, you have Rabbi Shabbatai Jaen, who writes drama, biblical drama, called Devorah.
Which language?
In Ladino, of course. And interestingly enough, when Devorah presents Avinoam, she says, he's my fiancé. I mean, totally European text. And these rabbis are not producing anymore the traditional text. So basically you can say that last people who produce text alla turca are the last person in Sarajevo. In Sarajevo it's very easy, you can even locate it. The last person who already had Western education but was still producing alla turca literature is Zeki Effendi. Moshe ben Raphael Atias, and he was still writing in Persian. And on his grave in Sarajevo, you have inscription in Hebrew, Ladino, and Persian.
Really?
Yeah. But that's the last alla turca person.
And I think we have only one more question and we have to move on. So
I would just like to know, how the text is segmented? I mean, are there chapters or subtitles or whatever, or the Padre Eliezer, you invented the content?
No, I invented. Okay. There are no titles.
Okay.
He brings ma'amarim of, he reads Zohar according to its order, and he skips anything that is not useful for his class.
To theory, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. But basically, it's chronological reading of Zohar, and each time he says, this is the text 155, this is text 100, and then he switches to 177, and then he switches to 212, right?
So you can follow, going back to the...
Yeah, and then immediately after Zohar, he always has his own Divrei Mussar, and I would like to argue that this is actually only the written version of an oral Zohar class. It's so obvious. The language, even the language he uses, is not necessarily the written language of rabbinic literature. It's rather the oral language of orally transmitted class.
well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And let me say a few words about our next speaker, Katya. Katya Smith received her PhD in linguistics from the University of Ljubljana in 2000.